The wind howled like a wounded beast across the Wyoming plains, lashing snow sideways through the narrow canyons of Dead Horse Ridge. The storm had come fast, as they always did this time of year fall, giving way to winter with no warning, no mercy. Eliza Granger pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame, her gloved hands trembling on the reins. Her mare, Daisy, snorted and stomped nervously, nearly vanishing in the thick curtain of snow. They had been riding hard for nearly 2 hours, trying to get back to Granger's Bluff before the pass closed. Now, they were lost. She looked down at the map she'd tried to memorize and cursed under her breath. Her father, Sheriff Amos Granger, had told her not to take the ridge trail alone, especially not this close to snow season, but Eliza had never been one to be told no. Not when it came to delivering medicine to old widow Hartley, not when it came to doing what she believed was right. Now, the medicine was lost somewhere in her saddlebag, frozen stiff most likely, and her only priority was staying alive. Daisy suddenly let out a low, panicked whinny and came to a halt. Eliza squinted through the snow. The world was white and gray and shifting. Then she saw Ida. Barely a few feet ahead, the trail disappeared into a sharp ravine. "Easy, girl," she whispered, patting the mare's neck. "Easy." Just as she turned the horse to backtrack, a jagged gust of wind cut through her coat like a knife. Her vision blurred. Her balance swayed. And then, the world tilted. She slid from the saddle and crumpled into the snow. The cold bit through her clothes instantly. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and her vision dimmed as the sky closed in. Far above the ridge, a dark figure watched. Jace Coulter hadn't meant to be there. He was headed south, avoiding Granger's Bluff on purpose. Too many memories. Too many men who still wanted his head hung high on the sheriff's office wall. 10 years had passed since he last rode through the town where he'd once lived back when he wasn't an outlaw. Before the bank job gone bad, before the blood on his hands and the bounty on his name. He was just looking for shelter when he saw the horse. A fine mare, quivering in the storm, reins hanging loose. Something was wrong. He nudged his Mustang forward and found her small frame curled up in the snow, red hair matted with ice. He dismounted and dropped to his knees beside her. "Hey, you alive?" No answer. Her lips were blue, pulse faint. He peeled off his coat and wrapped it around her, lifting her gently as he stood. She was light, fragile as a bird. He glanced at the saddlebag stamped with the Granger seal. His jaw clenched. The sheriff's daughter. Of all the people he could have found dying in the snow, it had to be Amos Granger's girl. He should have left her. Every instinct told him so. Ride away. Let the storm take her. No one would ever know. But he didn't. He couldn't. Not after what happened 10 years ago. By nightfall, Jace had found a shallow cave at the base of the bluff. He built a fire with trembling hands, melting snow in a tin pot and pressing the warm cloth to her face. Her skin was pale, too pale, but she stirred. "Pa," she whispered. Jace leaned back into the shadows, jaw set, hat pulled low. "Sorry, miss," he muttered. "Your PA ain't here. Just me." She drifted back into unconsciousness. Outside, the storm howled louder, drowning out the sounds of the past. And Jace Coulter, wanted outlaw, sat beside the dying daughter of the one man who would shoot him on sight and wondered if fate was giving him a second chance, or setting a cruel trap. The fire crackled low in the cave, casting flickering shadows against the stone walls. Jace Coulter sat cross-legged near the entrance, his rifle across his knees, watching the blizzard twist and claw at the world outside like a hungry ghost. Behind him, wrapped in his coat and a bedroll, the sheriff's daughter stirred again. He glanced over his shoulder. Her breathing had steadied, but her cheeks were still too pale, her lips tinged with blue. He hadn't heard her speak since the whisper about her father and she didn't yet know who'd saved her. Jace wasn't sure what he'd say when she asked. Morning came gray and bitter. The storm hadn't passed, but it had calmed enough to see down the ridge. Snow lay deep, untouched but for the trail of hoofprints he'd left dragging her from the ridge. His Mustang and her mare were tethered nearby, covered in snow but alive. Good stock. He fed the fire, checked his weapons, then moved to her side. She was awake, barely her eyes fluttering open like someone waking from a long nightmare. They were green, sharp, just like he remembered. "You're safe," he said quietly. She blinked. "Where?" "You're in a cave, north side of Dead Horse Ridge. You got caught in the storm." She tried to sit up, winced, and lay back down. "You brought me here." He nodded once. "You a trapper?" Jace considered that. Something like that. She studied him through narrowed eyes. "You don't look like a trapper." He didn't answer. Instead, he rose and poured her some warm water from the tin pot he'd left by the fire. She drank it slowly, her hands shaking as she held the cup. "What's your name?" she asked. Jace paused. Every instinct told him to lie. Give her a fake name. She wouldn't know the difference, but something about the way she looked at him half trusting, half suspicious made him hesitate. "Jace," he said. "Jace Coulter." The cup slipped from her fingers and clattered to the stone floor. "Coulter," she echoed, stunned. "As in, Jace Coulter, the outlaw." He didn't flinch. "I suppose the name still means something around here." She stared at him, wide-eyed. "You robbed the bank of Three Forks. Shot a marshal. They said you vanished." "I did," he said flatly, "until I found you dying in the snow." She shrank back a little, eyeing the rifle by the fire and the revolver at his hip. "Why'd you save me?" Jace looked into the flames. "That's a long story." Eliza had heard of Jace Coulter. Everyone in Wyoming Territory had. He'd once been a deputy in Granger's Bluff before her time, but the older folks still whispered about him. He was Sheriff Granger's protege, a good man gone bad. Stories said he got greedy, took the law into his own hands. Robbery, murder, disappeared into the mountains, never to be seen again. And now he was here, in the flesh, sitting not 10 feet from her, calm as anything, like he wasn't the most wanted man in the territory. She didn't know whether to thank him or run. Jace stood slowly and grabbed his coat. "I'm going to check the ridge. We might be stuck here a while." "Wait," she called. "Why would you risk helping me? You know who I am." "I do." "Then why?" He looked back, eyes dark beneath the brim of his hat. "Because once, a long time ago, I made a promise to your father, and I reckon this is my way of keeping it." He stepped out into the snow, leaving Eliza alone with 1,000 questions and a pounding heart. Outside, the wind tore at Jace's coat as he climbed the rise and scanned the horizon. The pass was still blocked, but not for long. Maybe a day or two. He figured the sheriff would send out a search party soon. Once he realized Eliza hadn't made it back to town, and when that happened, he'd have a decision to make. Let them find her and disappear before they saw him, or stay. Face Amos Granger. Face the past. Either choice would cost him something, but he wasn't the same man who rode into Three Forks with a gang and a plan. Somewhere in the middle of a blizzard and a promise, Jace Coulter had changed. And this time, he wasn't running. Not yet. The snow eased into a gentle fall by nightfall, laying thick and silent like a burial shroud over the wilderness. Inside the cave, the fire flickered between them. Eliza curled in the bedroll, still pale but stronger. And Jace Coulter, sharpening a long knife against a stone. The scrape steady and deliberate. She watched him in silence. There was something strange about being in a cave with a wanted man. One whose face had been nailed to bounty boards across the territory for a decade. She'd always imagined outlaws as monsters, dirty, cruel, drunk on violence. But Jace Coulter was quiet, calm, thoughtful, and far too good at keeping his distance. "How long do you think we'll be stuck here?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "Another day, maybe 2. Then we can try the lower pass." He looked up, dark eyes meeting hers. "I'm not about to leave you to ride through the snow alone. I can ride just fine." He didn't reply, just went back to sharpening the blade. Eliza leaned back against the cave wall, her legs curled under her. "You were the sheriff's deputy once. That true?" "It is. My father never talks about you. Just calls you a ghost, not worth chasing." Jace gave a bitter smile. "That sounds like Amos. You knew him well. Well enough to know he won't be happy when he sees me." She tilted her head. "So what happened, Jace? You were lost. Then you weren't." He paused. The fire snapped between them. Snow whispered at the cave mouth. "I made the mistake of thinking justice and law were the same thing," he said finally. "Turns out, they're not. Not always." Eliza frowned. "That's not much of an answer." "No, it ain't." He rose and moved to the cave mouth, looking out into the night like he was trying to see through time. Eliza couldn't help herself. She crawled to her knees and reached for the saddlebags. Her fingers were stiff, but she opened the flap and dug through until she found it a folded copy of an old wanted poster. Jace Coulter, bank robbery, assault, murder of a federal marshal, $2,000 dead or alive. She stared at it. She knew the story, of course. Everyone did. The bank of Three Forks. The bloody shootout. The marshal's body found in the alley, but now, staring across the fire at the man himself, she wondered what she didn't know. "Did you do it?" she asked softly. "Kill that marshal." Jace turned slowly, saw the poster in her hand, and exhaled. "No." "Then why didn't you ever come back and clear your name?" "Because no one would have listened. I had my shot. I took the fall for someone else. That's how it works out. Here you either carry the truth or you carry the blame." Eliza studied him. Who were you protecting? He didn't answer. But the fire between them sparked higher, as if sensing the truth buried beneath the silence. Later that night, as the storm grew quiet and the wind died down, Jace sat near the mouth of the cave while Elisa dozed near the fire. His rifle lay across his lap, but his mind was elsewhere 10 years back. In the shadow of the Three Forks bank, he remembered the gunfire, the panic, the betrayal. He'd taken the job because he'd needed the money for his sister, dying of consumption down in Laramie, but he hadn't known the other men planned to kill. When the marshal stepped in, Jace tried to stop it. Too late, the gang rode off. Jace stayed behind, tried to help the dying lawman, but by the time the townsfolk arrived, all they saw was a dead federal officer and one man holding the gun. He never had a chance after that. As dawn crept over the snow-covered ridges, Eliza stirred, her eyes meeting his in the half-light. "I believe you," she said. Jace blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because you didn't leave me in the snow. You stayed, and I think you've been carrying more than just that rifle all these years." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because in the quiet between them, something had shifted. Not trust, not fully, but something close. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to survive what was coming next. Because down in Granger's Bluff, a sheriff was mounting a search party, and when Amos Granger found his daughter alive and the outlaw who saved her standing beside her, the snow wouldn't be the only thing about to break loose. The ride back to Granger's Bluff was slow and silent. Snow still clung to the mountains, turning the world ghost white, but the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long golden rays over the valley. Jace rode ahead, scanning every ridge and hollow. He didn't like riding into a trap, but that's exactly what it felt like. Eliza, though weak, was determined to stay in the saddle. Her mare had weathered the storm just like her, worn down, but not broken. As they descended the final slope toward the outskirts of town, Jace reined in his Mustang and turned to her. "We part ways here." She narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've taken you far enough. You're almost home. You don't need me riding in beside you with a bounty on my head." Eliza sat straighter in the saddle. "You think I'd just let you disappear after what you did? That's the idea." She kicked her mare forward, blocking his path. "You saved my life, Coulter, and if my father can't see that, then maybe he's not the lawman I thought he was." Jace gave a half smile. "You really think Amos Granger's going to welcome me with open arms? Last time he saw me, he promised to shoot me dead if I ever set foot in this town again. I'll talk to him." "You can't protect me." "No," she said, "but I can tell the truth." He looked at her. Really looked. She was young, fiery, stubborn as a mule. She reminded him of someone he used to know. Himself. Finally, Jace nodded once. "All right, sheriff's daughter. Let's ride." They hit the main street just before noon. The townsfolk froze when they saw them. Eliza riding in, cheeks flushed, hair whipping in the wind, and beside her, a tall figure in a dusty trail coat and broad-brimmed hat. The whispers started. Immediately, "It's her, she's alive. Who's that with her? Is that, can't be Jace Coulter?" By the time they reached the sheriff's office, a small crowd had gathered. The door burst open, and out stepped Amos Granger, tall, gray, his badge catching the light. His rifle was slung over his shoulder, and the moment he saw his daughter, his face cracked with a mix of relief and fury. "Eliza," he barked. "You all right?" "I'm fine, Pa." She dismounted and ran to him. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. And then, his eyes shifted, right past her to the man standing 10 feet behind. Jace Coulter dismounted slowly, hands away from his guns, face unreadable. The sheriff stiffened. "You've got a hell of a nerve showing your face here." Jace didn't flinch. "She'd be dead in the snow if I hadn't." The rifle came off the sheriff's shoulder. "That doesn't change what you did." "I didn't kill that Marshal Amos." The crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled through the street. Eliza stepped between them. "He didn't. He told me everything." "Did he?" Granger growled. "And you believed him?" "I believe what I saw. He kept me alive. He protected me. He could have left me, but he didn't." Granger raised the rifle. "Step aside, Eliza." "No, and Elisa. No. Pa, you told me the law was about truth, justice. Then show me you meant it." "Let him speak." The sheriff hesitated. For the first time in years, the weight of what had been lost, Jace's betrayal, the silence that followed, the years without answers, sat heavy on his shoulders. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. They moved inside the sheriff's office, just the three of them. Eliza sat beside the stove, warming her hands, while Jace stood by the window, watching the townsfolk disperse. You said you didn't kill him, Amos said, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. Start talking. Jace took a slow breath. The job was meant to be clean. Just grab the bank's transport and ride. I didn't know they planned to kill the marshal. When he showed up, things went sideways fast. I tried to stop it, hell. I was the only one who stayed behind. Tried to help. But when the townsfolk came, I was the one holding the gun. Why didn't you come to me? Because you wouldn't have listened. You were so damn sure I'd turned bad. You saw what you wanted to see. The silence stretched. Finally, Granger said, you should have run farther. I did, but fate brought me back. He looked at Eliza. She brought me back. Outside, the town simmered with questions. Inside, 2 old friends stared across 10 years of silence and pain. I can't undo what happened, Jace said, but I saved your daughter. That's got to count for something. Granger looked down at the badge on his chest, and for the first time in years, the lawman didn't see black and white. He saw gray. Stay in town, he said quietly. You and I were not done. Jace nodded. Neither of them noticed Eliza smiling quietly by the stove. Dawn rose cold and quiet over Granger's Bluff. The sky was clear for the first time in days, painting the world in hues of gold and frost blue. The town stirred slowly. Wagons creaked to life. Boots crunched over frostbitten planks, and smoke curled from chimneys. But inside the sheriff's office, the air was heavy. Eliza stood at the window, arms crossed, watching townsfolk glance up at the building, then quickly look away. Some still whispered the name Coulter, like it was poison. Others, she could tell, were beginning to wonder. Her father sat at his desk, his old tin star catching the morning light. He hadn't said much since last night, and Jace Coulter. He stood quietly in the corner, leaning against the wall, a man at the edge of a reckoning. We can't just pretend this never happened, Amos Granger finally said, not looking at either of them. No one's asking you to. Jace replied, I've got a deputy headed to 3 Forks. If what you said is true, they'll be if one of your old gangs survived, maybe he left a trail. There was one. Will Dyer. He ran south, might be in Colorado territory? The sheriff nodded. If I can find him, and he confirms your story, and if he doesn't, Granger looked up, then you'll hang. Jace nodded. Fair enough. Eliza turned from the window. You're really going through with this? Jace gave a faint smile. I spent 10 years hiding in the shadows, thinking it was too late to change anything, but you called me back into the light. Now I've got to face whatever's waiting. She stepped closer. You saved me, Jace. That has to matter. It does, he said gently, but it doesn't erase what came before. By noon, word had spread. Sheriff Granger posted a notice on the office door. Trial of Jace Coulter to be held within the week. All witnesses to report. The town buzzed with tension. Some cried for justice, others whispered about redemption, and that night, as the saloon filled with uneasy murmurs and the wind picked up again in the mountains, a shadow crossed the bluff. A rider approached, grizzled, dust-covered, and mean-looking. He tied his horse outside the old boarding house, tipped his hat low, and headed straight for the saloon. Name's Will Dyer, he told the bartender. Heard there's a man here claiming I owe him the truth. It all came to a head the next morning. The trial wasn't in a courtroom. There wasn't one in Granger's Bluff. Instead, the townsfolk gathered in the church hall, benches packed, eyes fixed on the front where the sheriff stood between the accused and the witness. Jace looked calm, ready. Dyer took the stand, spitting a wad of tobacco before he spoke. That day at 3 Forks, Sheriff Granger said, Did Coulter kill the marshal? Dyer scratched his beard. Hell no. Jace was the only one with any damn sense that day. He tried to stop Clegg from pulling the trigger. That's why we left him behind. Figured he'd hang anyway, take the fall. Murmurs erupted. Granger's jaw tightened. You willing to sign a written statement? Dyer snorted. Sure. I owe the man that much. He saved my hide more times than I can count. The sheriff nodded slowly, then turned to the crowd. Jace Coulter has been wanted for 10 years, Granger said, but the L'Oreal law don't just swing on rumors. It rides with truth, and the truth says this man was wronged. He turned to Jace. You're free to go. A hush swept through the hall, then slowly. Applause. Tentative at first, then stronger. Jace didn't smile. He just looked at Eliza. She beamed. Later, outside the church, Jace stood by his Mustang, ready to ride. Granger approached, not with a rifle, but with a handshake. You could stay. You know, he said. Town could use men who understand the cost of justice. I might, Jace said, but I need to ride for a while, not away, just forward. He looked at Eliza. Maybe I'll come back. She smiled. eyes full of fire and hope. "I'll be waiting." He mounted his horse, tipped his hat to both of them, and turned toward the rising sun. As Jace Coulter rode out of Granger's Bluff, the wind stirred the snow behind him, erasing the old trayland, carving a new one. He wasn't just a ghost anymore, he was a man reborn, and the West, as wild as ever, was waiting.